evening, everyone. We have come to the last session of the day, something that we have all been waiting for, and a lot of work went behind it. It's the ICA Food Writing Prize. As you all might know that it's also India's first food writing prize. We didn't have a dedicated prize for food writing till now. Colleen Taylor Sen was part of the final jury along with Dr. Krishnendu Ray and me, who selected the winner from the finalists who were selected from a long list by a very able jury, but I'll leave all that to Anshuman later. I'll just take a minute to introduce Dr. Sen. It's my absolute privilege. Dr. Colleen Taylor Sen is a Chicago-based Canadian-American culinary historian. She's the author or co-editor of 8 books, including Food Culture in India, Curry, A Global History, Turmeric, The Wonder Spice, Street Food Around the World, an Encyclopedia of Food and Culture, Feasts and Fasts, A History of Indian Food, and the Bloomsbury Handbook of Indian Cuisine. Her books have been translated into Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. She has a degree from the University of Toronto and Columbia University, all in Slavic languages. Dr. Colleen Taylor Sen, everyone.
Congratulate Tanushree Owen and team for just organizing this really important, groundbreaking conference, and on a topic that is very central to the history of food in India. I'm honored to have been invited to participate as one of the judges, and the papers I read were really excellent and showed just amazing breadth and depth and research. When I published my book, Feasts and Fasts, A History of Food in India 9 years ago, it was published first in the UK and then in India. I was kind of nervous for a couple of reasons. One was that I was not Indian, although I have an Indian surname because of my marriage. And second, because the other work of a similar scope, K.T. Achaya's writings, were really kind of the Bible in this area. Fortunately, the book was well received, and I only got really one negative comment on Facebook to the effect as why a foreigner was writing this book. And I had several kind of replies in mind, but I restrained myself. And then several well-known food writers came to my defense, and I felt a lot better. But there was still the lingering thought in my mind that somebody in India should have written this book or similar books on the history of Indian food. And I'm really happy to see that this has now happened. We've had some wonderful books published on the history of food in Calcutta and other places. Now, when Tanushree asked me to speak, I asked her if it would be okay to tell a little bit about how I came to publish my books, since I think that may be something of interest to this audience. I had written about Indian food for decades in Chicago as a part-time freelance journalist. In those days, it was much easier to do this. And my articles are really about the diversity of Indian food. I wanted to write about things like Maharashtrian food and Kerala food and so on, to let people here know that Indian food is more than just North Indian and so-called Mughlai food, which unfortunately is to some degree still standard restaurant food. Over the years, I accumulated a great deal of material, but how did this turn into books? Well, it's really a matter of personal meetings and contacts, and especially at a conference like this. In 1996, I attended the Oxford Symposium of Food for the first time, and there I met 2 prominent American food historians, both of whom had just begun editing series on food for different publishers. They had each commissioned the first book in their series and looking for a second. And I volunteered because I was writing about Indian food. So I got my first contract, which was for Food Culture in India for Greenwood, which is now part of the Bloomsbury conglomerate, and then A History of Curry for Reaction. And then this just led to other contracts, because it's like everything in life, once you get a little bit of experience, it's easier to do things, but getting that first break is what the difficult thing is. So several years ago, Sanju Malhotra, who was an Indian living in Sweden, began a series. He held, I've forgotten how many, 3 or 4 conferences in Delhi called Tasting India. And again, this was just an amazing source of ideas and contacts. I met so many people here. I met chefs, I met writers, I met public relations people, I met publishers. And probably many of you people that are here today, I know I met Charmaine for the first time at one of these meetings. So I think a conference like this is just the ideal place to meet people, to get ideas, especially to find out what's going on in the food world. And there's so many opportunities for a writer. Now, the pioneer for all these food symposia is, of course, the Oxford Food Symposia. And when Ellen Davidson and Theodore Zeldin started it in 1979, they specified that this should not be a conference just for academics, but for people from many different fields, people who have a passion for food and people who are interested in it. And I think it's important to keep this in mind, that it's still a new field, writing about food. So there's really a lot of opportunities for everybody. Now, when I'm writing about Indian food, I'm at a disadvantage because I really don't know any Indian languages except for English. All my degrees are in Slavic languages, but ironically, although I can read and write Polish and Russian, I've never written about these cuisines and I don't know anything about them, which is very kind of sad. Fortunately, there's a large body of writing in English, including translations of all the major religious works and other works that I could draw upon. But this can only take you so far. So writers like you who can read different Indian languages have a real advantage and can do a lot of original research by, for example, going for the records of royal kitchens, by going through newspaper archives, and for interviewing the cooks at especially temples and langars, who may remember some of the traditions that have been passed on. When I started writing about Indian food, 40 or 50 years ago, there were still a few pioneers around. I interviewed Kundan Lal in his home, I also interviewed a Moog cook who worked at the Gymkhana Club, and I only wish I had done a lot more of this, where some of these people were still alive and could remember some of the traditions even of that time. So in conclusion, I really want to congratulate Tanushree, Om, and the organizers of this conference, the authors of everybody who contributed papers to this pioneering event, and especially, of course, to the winning papers. And I hope this will only be the first of many of these conferences to come, that this will become an annual or at least a biannual event. And I really hope in the future I'll be able to come in person because, it would be great to be there and meet everybody. So thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you for your insightful remarks and also sharing your experience of writing on Indian food from, I think you said 40 years ago almost. Extraordinary.